Wake up, and don't be startled. Victoria's voice was soft yet commanding, cutting through the quiet of the morning like a beam of sunlight piercing the fog. Ethan Hayes opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the warm glow spilling through the blinds, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. For a moment, the world felt suspended, the usual clutter of his small apartment fading into the edges of his vision, replaced by the unexpected presence of Victoria Langford standing by the bed, her expression an inscrutable mix of amusement and curiosity. He swallowed, the words caught somewhere between surprise and disbelief, and instinctively reached for the t-shirt he'd slept in, realizing she had somehow ended up wearing it as she stood there. Casual yet impossibly elegant, her posture straight, commanding attention without even trying. The quiet in the room was profound, filled with the soft hum of the heater and the distant sounds of the city waking beyond his window, but the tension was alive, palpable, like the silent pause before the first note of a symphony. Ethan's mind raced, not with fear or irritation, but with the familiar rhythm of calm observation he had cultivated over years of juggling work, parenting, and the unpredictable turns of life. Victoria tilted her head slightly, the hint of a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth, and the way her eyes lingered on him made his chest tighten with an emotion he hadn't named, a mixture of awe, recognition, and that delicate curiosity reserved for moments that defy expectation. He could hear the faint click of her heels as she shifted her weight, a soft, deliberate sound that contrasted sharply with the chaotic energy of his usual mornings, and yet somehow it fit perfectly within this suspended, almost cinematic moment. The small apartment, usually a haven of routine and quiet sacrifice, felt charged with possibility. The ordinary objects around them, the coffee pot, the half-open laptop, the scattered papers, becoming props in a scene that seemed both intimate and extraordinary. Ethan's fingers brushed against the soft cotton of the t-shirt, grounding him, reminding him that even in moments that seemed impossible, there was a rhythm, a dignity in how one carried oneself. He met Victoria's gaze, steady and calm, and in that glance, a quiet conversation passed between them without a single word, an unspoken acknowledgement of respect, curiosity, and the subtle thrill of chance encounters that could reshape the course of a day or a life. The morning light shifted across the room, catching the highlights in her hair and the glint of determination in her eyes, and Ethan realized that despite the strangeness of the situation, there was a sense of grace in how they existed in the same space, an unhurried moment that allowed them both to measure, observe, and reflect. He could feel the pulse of the day outside his window, the traffic, the birds, the distant hum of engines and footsteps, yet inside, time had slowed, focusing attention on this quiet, charged exchange. Ethan inhaled slowly, savoring the calm strength in his own body, the quiet dignity that had carried him through countless challenges, and he recognized it reflected in her posture, in the poised, almost imperceptible confidence she radiated. Words hovered, unspoken, hovering in the charged air between them, teasing the boundaries of what could be said, what could be shared, and what would remain a silent acknowledgement of presence, understanding, and the mysterious ways that life orchestrates its moments of revelation. In that quiet, Ethan felt the strange blend of normalcy and extraordinary collide. The ordinary morning transformed into a tableau of subtle power, respect, and second chances, all contained within the simple act of waking to an impossible, almost surreal scene. The morning light continued to filter through the blinds, casting long golden stripes across the worn wooden floor of Ethan Hayes' apartment. His 9-year-old daughter, Lily, still curled up under her quilt in the corner, breathed evenly, oblivious to the unusual scene unfolding by her father's bed. Ethan quietly sat up, his back creaking slightly, and studied Victoria Langford, who remained standing, her hands lightly resting on the edges of the shirt she had somehow ended up in. The air between them held a curious tension, a mixture of surprise, unspoken questions, and the gentle hum of possibilities that neither could yet name. Ethan cleared his throat softly, careful to maintain the calm demeanor he had relied on for so many years, his voice measured, quiet, carrying the weight of patience and dignity. "I did not expect you to be here," he said, his eyes never leaving hers, conveying more through calm observation than any hurried words could have. Victoria's lips curved into a subtle, enigmatic smile, one that hinted at amusement, but also contained the faintest edge of respect, and she shifted her weight slightly, the soft rustle of the shirt fabric filling the quiet room with a delicate sound that seemed almost ceremonial. The apartment itself felt charged, each object ordinary, yet elevated by the significance of the moment. The coffee mug on the counter, the open notebook with Lily's sketches, the faint scent of cinnamon and pine wafting from the kitchen. Ethan stood slowly, his movements deliberate, careful not to startle her, as if each gesture was a note in a symphony of composure and respect. Victoria tilted her head, gray eyes meeting his, and for a fraction of a second, the usual barrier of status and expectation dissolved, leaving only the raw, human recognition of presence. "I suppose this is not the typical start to your day," she said, her voice soft but laced with authority, carrying the kind of confidence that made silence itself seem heavy with attention. Ethan nodded, allowing a ghost of a smile to appear, one that acknowledged the peculiarity of the situation without compromising the quiet strength he carried in every aspect of his life. He moved toward the kitchen, gesturing toward the coffee pot, a silent invitation to settle into the strange intimacy of shared space. And Victoria accepted, following his lead with an ease that belied her status, her eyes still flicking with curiosity and careful assessment. As she poured herself a cup, the subtle tilt of her posture, the careful attention to her movements, conveyed grace without arrogance, presence without demand, and Ethan found himself noting these qualities with a quiet admiration that went unspoken but resonated in the stillness. The clock ticked softly, marking the passage of minutes that seemed elongated by anticipation, and Ethan watched the way light caught the strands of her hair, how she lingered over small gestures, the way her attention seemed equally divided between observation and unspoken reflection. He could feel the tension ebb slightly, the room breathing around them, the normal morning sounds, the distant cars, the hum of the refrigerator, Lily's occasional stirring, interweaving with the heightened awareness of shared humanity. Ethan finally set a mug down in front of her, his hand brushing the edge of the counter lightly, and Victoria accepted it with a nod, the contact brief but grounding, a tangible connection in the delicate balance of politeness, curiosity, and mutual recognition. Words seemed unnecessary, each gesture, glance, and breath carrying more meaning than a hurried explanation ever could. In the quiet of that early morning, both of them acknowledged the unusual circumstances with a composed understanding, the kind that comes only from life experience, resilience, and a willingness to meet the unexpected with calm dignity. The room remained silent, not from discomfort, but from the reverent attention to the subtle dance of two people navigating a moment that defied ordinary routine, each aware of the unspoken truth that the morning had unfolded into something rare, delicate, and quietly transformative. The sunlight shifted subtly, brushing across the edges of the worn carpet as Ethan Hayes moved with quiet deliberation through his apartment, preparing a small breakfast for Lily before school. Victoria Langford remained near the kitchen counter, her movements measured and precise, yet there was an ease to the way she poured her coffee, a contrast to the careful attention Ethan paid to every simple, nurturing gesture. The scent of fresh toast and brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of pine from the small decorative plant on the windowsill, grounding the room in a comforting domesticity that belied the extraordinary presence within it. Ethan placed a plate with a slice of toast and a small bowl of fruit in front of Lily, whose eyes opened slowly, bright and curious, catching the subtle tension and unfamiliar excitement in the air. Victoria's gaze followed him, studying the way he moved, the meticulous care in which he arranged each small detail, noting how his quiet strength radiated not from words or displays, but from the consistency of his actions and the gentle authority he commanded in his own home. "You have a remarkable sense of order," she said softly, her voice carrying both admiration and genuine curiosity, and Ethan nodded slightly, a faint smile touching his lips. There was a rhythm to their interaction, a cadence of respect and mutual acknowledgement, each gesture a conversation in itself. Victoria's eyes drifted briefly to the small framed photograph on the counter, A snapshot of Ethan and Lily laughing in the park, the sun catching their hair, a frozen moment of ordinary happiness, and she allowed herself a quiet reflection on the humanity and resilience evident in that single frame. Ethan prepared a second cup of coffee for himself, taking a moment to inhale the morning air, the faint chill from the slightly open window blending with the warmth of the kitchen. The apartment, modest and lived in, seemed to pulse with an unspoken narrative, the soft hum of appliances, the faint creak of floorboards, and the distant sounds of traffic outside blending seamlessly into a backdrop that framed the delicate tension and unexpected intimacy of the morning. Victoria took a careful step closer to the small dining table, observing Lily with a soft, approving smile, noting the child's quiet confidence and ease within the space her father had meticulously shaped. Ethan gestured to the chair opposite him, inviting Victoria to sit without breaking the calm atmosphere, and she accepted, her presence somehow both commanding and unintrusive, adjusting her posture in a way that acknowledged the subtle hierarchy of experience, wisdom, and quiet dignity between them. They shared the space in a rhythm that spoke volumes, unhurried and intentional, each aware of the other's presence without the need for continuous dialogue. Outside, the city had begun to stir more fully, the distant hum of engines and footsteps marking the passage of time. Yet inside, there was a deliberate suspension, a pocket of calm and anticipation that allowed both Ethan and Victoria to measure and reflect on the unfolding of events. As they both sipped their coffee, the silence was filled with a rich tapestry of observation, subtle emotion, and the undercurrent of possibility, each small gesture and glance layered with meaning. Victoria finally spoke, her tone gentle yet imbued with authority, commenting on the way Ethan had maintained this space, balancing care and discipline, warmth and structure, and Ethan responded with a quiet nod, acknowledging her insight without the need for explanation, allowing the unspoken communication between them to flow freely. The moment lingered, unbroken and reverent, as the morning light shifted slowly across the room, capturing dust motes in a golden haze. The ordinary transformed into something quietly cinematic, a delicate interplay of respect, curiosity, and the first hints of connection that promised the unfolding of a story larger than either could yet comprehend. Victoria set her coffee cup carefully on the counter, the ceramic making a soft, deliberate sound that punctuated the quiet of the apartment. She moved closer to the window, letting the morning light illuminate her features as she observed Ethan preparing a small plate of breakfast for Lily, noting the methodical care with which he arranged the food, the gentle attention to the small details that spoke of years of parenting and quiet resilience. Ethan glanced at her briefly, acknowledging her presence without needing to explain, the calm strength in his gaze conveying more than words ever could. Lily stirred slightly, reaching for her cup, and Victoria's eyes softened at the sight of the small routine unfolding before her, a glimpse into the ordinary yet profound life of a man who carried dignity in every action. The city outside began its slow awakening, distant traffic hum mingling with the faint chirping of birds, yet inside the apartment, there was a deliberate stillness, a suspended moment that allowed both of them to measure the space, the silence, and each other. Ethan moved to place a napkin beside the plate, his hands steady and deliberate, the kind of small, deliberate gestures that conveyed patience, care, and a quiet authority born of experience. Victoria tilted her head slightly, studying the way he interacted with the child, the subtle grace in his movements, the effortless way he commanded respect through calm and consideration rather than assertion. She noted the textures, the worn edges of the table, the soft fabric of the chairs, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, all ordinary elements yet transformed by the charged atmosphere and their attentive observation. "It is remarkable how you manage to balance everything," Victoria said softly, her tone carrying both curiosity and quiet admiration, and Ethan nodded in acknowledgement, a small, almost imperceptible gesture that spoke volumes about his measured, thoughtful nature. The room seemed to breathe along with them, each inhalation and exhalation marking time in a way that felt both deliberate and suspended, as if the morning itself had paused to observe the unfolding of an unexpected encounter. Ethan handed Lily her plate, watching her eyes light up with appreciation, and Victoria's gaze followed, her expression softening further, a quiet acknowledgement of the beauty found in simple, consistent acts of care. The faint smell of toasted bread mixed with brewed coffee and the soft scent of pine from the small plant on the windowsill, creating a sensory tableau that enhanced the intimacy and calm of the moment. They moved with unspoken coordination, each step, glance, and gesture flowing naturally within the rhythm of the room, a silent communication of respect, observation, and emerging connection. Victoria sipped her coffee, the warmth of the cup grounding her in the ordinary, even as her attention remained drawn to Ethan's composed demeanor and the way he managed the rhythm of a morning that was anything but ordinary. Ethan's hands brushed over the counter briefly, setting down his own cup, the motion deliberate and grounded, and Victoria noticed the quiet strength in these gestures, the unspoken consistency that defined him, a subtle but powerful presence that commanded attention without a word. They shared the space, acknowledging each other's existence through gestures, glances, and the measured cadence of their movements, the unhurried tempo creating a sense of cinematic intimacy and quiet tension. Outside, the city continued to stir, cars moving along distant streets, the occasional murmur of pedestrians, yet inside, their shared awareness and the layered observations of subtle emotion, careful attention, and tentative curiosity transformed the apartment into a sanctuary of stillness, anticipation, and emerging understanding. Each small motion, each glance, and the cadence of the morning carried a richness of experience, respect, and the first glimmers of connection, a delicate interplay of grace, observation, and unspoken acknowledgement that promised the unfolding of something larger than a mere encounter, something quietly transformative. Ethan moved to the counter to refill his own coffee, the faint clink of the mug against the countertop marking a quiet rhythm that seemed to echo through the apartment. Victoria remained near the small dining table, her posture relaxed yet attentive, observing the details of the space with the kind of acute awareness that came naturally to someone accustomed to command and precision. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the subtle ticking of the wall clock formed a backdrop to the unspoken conversation that lingered in the air between them, each moment stretching deliberately, filled with observation and quiet contemplation. Ethan carried the mug back to the table, setting it down gently beside the plate of toast, and for a brief instant, their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement passing between them that needed no words, a recognition of shared presence and careful attention. Lily giggled softly at a small spill of juice on her napkin, and Victoria's lips curved into a gentle smile, a subtle acknowledgement of the ordinary joys that punctuated the quiet dignity of Ethan's daily life. Ethan chuckled faintly, brushing a crumb from the edge of the plate, his movements slow, intentional, reflecting a steadiness cultivated through years of balancing work, fatherhood, and the unexpected turns life had delivered. Victoria took a small sip of her coffee, eyes scanning the apartment once more, noting the personal touches, the framed photographs, the small stack of books, the worn but cared-for furniture, each element telling a story of resilience, routine, and quiet strength. She leaned slightly on the edge of the table, elbows resting lightly, and for a fleeting moment, the barrier of formal expectation seemed to dissolve, leaving only the simple humanity of two people in a shared space. Ethan spoke softly, almost conversationally, about the morning routine, the way he liked to structure their days, the small joys of breakfast and shared conversation, his words deliberate, each carrying a subtle gravity that underscored his calm, composed nature. Victoria nodded in response, attentive, absorbing each detail, noting the balance of responsibility and grace that defined him, the quiet leadership inherent in his actions, and the gentle authority he exercised without any need for display. The room felt suspended in a deliberate quiet, each sound amplified in its significance, the soft scrape of a chair, the delicate clatter of a spoon against a bowl, the muted hum of the city beyond the window, and within this carefully held silence, the morning expanded, slow, rich, and intimate. Ethan's hand brushed lightly over the edge of the table as he leaned slightly forward, an unconscious gesture of connection and attention, and Victoria mirrored the subtle motion, her movements measured yet natural, creating an unspoken harmony in the shared space. The light continued to shift across the room, warm and golden, highlighting the textures of the worn wooden floor, the soft fabric of the chairs, the subtle patterns in the countertop, each detail framing the quiet intensity of the unfolding encounter. Lily, now fully awake, played quietly with a small toy, her presence adding life to the room without disrupting the delicate cadence, and Ethan glanced at her with a faint, approving smile, while Victoria allowed herself a soft exhale, a gentle acknowledgement of the life and rhythm that surrounded them. They continued in this subtle exchange, moving with grace and awareness, each aware of the other's presence, the quiet tension balanced with curiosity, respect, and the unspoken recognition that the morning held possibilities beyond ordinary expectation, a tableau of calm dignity, quiet strength, and emerging connection that promised more than a simple encounter. A shared narrative of resilience, observation, and the first glimmers of trust and understanding that could shape the unfolding hours of the day. The soft morning light shifted further across the kitchen floor, illuminating the small imperfections in the wooden table and the faint scratches in the well-worn countertop, each mark a silent testament to years of family meals, quiet mornings, and everyday life. Ethan Hayes moved carefully around the apartment, gathering the dishes from breakfast and placing them in the sink, the gentle clink of porcelain and silverware filling the room with a rhythm that was at once ordinary and calming. Victoria Langford watched him, her posture relaxed yet attentive, noting the precise, unhurried way he moved, the dignity and consistency embedded in each action, the quiet strength that required no recognition but demanded respect. The faint aroma of brewed coffee mingled with the warm scent of toast, the air carrying the subtle undertones of domesticity that made the moment feel both intimate and cinematic. Ethan paused briefly to adjust a chair, his hand lingering on the edge as if measuring the space, and Victoria followed the gesture with her eyes, impressed by the care woven into every mundane motion, the attentiveness that spoke of character and a deep-rooted sense of responsibility. Lily was now sitting fully upright, brushing crumbs from her small hands, her eyes glinting with curiosity and quiet delight, and Victoria allowed herself a soft smile, recognizing the subtle harmony between father and child, the warmth that flowed naturally from routine, patience, and gentle guidance. Ethan spoke in measured tones, commenting on the plans for the day, the small tasks that needed attention, his voice calm and deliberate, carrying a quiet authority that was both reassuring and engaging. Victoria responded with thoughtful observations, her tone steady, her words carefully chosen, reflecting both awareness and the subtle acknowledgement of the environment and the unfolding interaction. The light from the window highlighted the faint highlights in her hair, catching the contours of her face in a way that emphasized both composure and presence, and Ethan could not help but notice the precision of her movements, the way she occupied space with grace and intentionality. There was a pause, a delicate stillness as both of them shared the room, the unspoken dialogue conveyed through glances, gestures, and the rhythmic cadence of their presence. Outside, the sounds of the city had grown, distant engines, soft pedestrian footsteps, and the occasional hum of delivery trucks, but inside the apartment, the rhythm of morning carried on in deliberate, unhurried pulses, each sound and motion accentuating the shared awareness and emerging understanding between them. Ethan set a cup of water on the table and gestured subtly toward the small stack of papers and books that marked the beginning of Lily's day, and Victoria accepted the gesture with quiet acknowledgement, the simplicity of the action layered with meaning and attention. They continued their subtle exchange, each movement, glance, and gentle shift in posture reinforcing the sense of connection, the mutual recognition of patience, observation, and respect, the space becoming a quiet stage upon which the ordinary transformed into a moment charged with significance. Ethan's eyes met hers once more, steady and calm, reflecting a sense of grace and resilience, and Victoria returned the gaze with equal composure, a flicker of acknowledgement, admiration, and the tentative spark of trust that had begun to root itself in the careful, measured cadence of the morning. Each gesture, each breath, and each minute sound, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint rustle of paper, the quiet tick of the clock, layered the scene with tension, curiosity, and quiet anticipation, creating an intimate cinematic tableau that would remain vivid long after the morning had passed, an unspoken testament to character, dignity, and the subtle unfolding of connection and understanding. Ethan moved to the small desk by the window, placing his mug down and leaning slightly to look out at the quiet street below, the morning sun reflecting off the rooftops and glinting through the leaves of the old oak trees lining the block. Victoria followed his gaze, her expression softening as she took in the same view, noting the calm rhythm of the neighborhood, the way the sunlight caught on the dew still lingering on the grass, and the subtle warmth that seemed to pulse through the ordinary scene. The apartment felt suspended in time, each detail of the room, the worn wooden floors, the neatly stacked dishes, the faint scent of coffee and toast, imbued with significance by the presence of both of them, the space itself a silent witness to the unfolding connection. Ethan turned slightly, his eyes meeting Victoria's once more, steady, calm, and unhurried, conveying a quiet strength and the gentle confidence of a man who had navigated challenges with patience and dignity. Victoria allowed herself a small nod, a recognition of the composure and character evident in his movements, in the way he carried himself without fanfare or unnecessary display. Lily reached over to adjust her small chair, her soft movements punctuating the stillness with a gentle sense of life and continuity, and both adults observed with quiet appreciation, each aware of the subtle cues and rhythms of family life. Ethan spoke softly about the plans for the day, mentioning errands, school drop-off, and a few minor household tasks, his tone measured and deliberate, each word chosen with care, his voice calm and even, carrying the weight of consideration and responsibility. Victoria responded thoughtfully, her voice low and steady, noting small details, offering observations that revealed both curiosity and the attentive awareness of someone accustomed to understanding environments and people quickly yet respectfully. The soft ticking of the clock on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator, and the distant sounds of the city beyond the window blended into a gentle backdrop, each ordinary sound accentuating the quiet intimacy of the moment. Ethan picked up a small notepad to jot down reminders for Lily's day, his pen moving smoothly across the paper, and Victoria watched, the faint glint of sunlight reflecting in her eyes, impressed by the careful thought and attention to detail in the smallest aspects of his life. He looked up briefly, their eyes meeting again, and in that glance, there was an unspoken acknowledgement, a shared understanding of the significance of the morning, the subtle rhythm of observation and connection, and the mutual respect that had begun to take root. The apartment seemed to breathe with them, the soft rustle of papers, the slight shift of a chair, the measured placement of dishes, all forming a silent symphony of calm, careful movements that spoke more eloquently than words could. Victoria took a careful sip of her coffee, the warmth grounding her in the moment, and Ethan continued to move with quiet grace, preparing a small snack for Lily, arranging it with deliberate care, and offering it with a gentle, reassuring smile. Outside, the city had grown busier, faint sounds of traffic and pedestrians carrying the pulse of life beyond the walls of the apartment. Yet within, time felt suspended, the ordinary elevated into something quietly cinematic, a delicate interplay of observation, respect, and the early, subtle stirrings of trust and understanding that promised more than a simple morning encounter. Each gesture, glance, and small motion layered the scene with a richness of emotion, a sense of quiet dignity, and the anticipation of connection, crafting a tableau that was intimate, calm, and filled with understated power. The ordinary transformed into a moment of subtle revelation, grace, and second chances unfolding with each measured breath and deliberate movement. The apartment seemed to settle into a rhythm of quiet understanding as Ethan Hayes placed the last clean cup on the counter and straightened, his eyes meeting Victoria Langford's with a calm steadiness that mirrored the subtle intensity in her own gaze. Lily was now fully engaged with her small stack of books, flipping pages softly, her attention absorbed in the familiar cadence of story and imagination, and the faint sound of her breathing added a gentle backdrop to the charged tranquility of the morning. Victoria leaned slightly against the edge of the counter, her posture relaxed yet deliberate, observing Ethan's movements with an attentiveness that revealed both curiosity and respect, the kind of observation that noted details others might overlook. The precise way he aligned the napkins on the table, the care with which he handled the plates, and the understated confidence in the way he navigated the familiar space of his home. Ethan paused, tilting his head slightly, as if measuring the weight of the moment, and Victoria noticed the subtle change in expression, a shift that spoke of thoughtfulness, empathy, and the quiet consideration of consequences that defined his daily life. Outside the window, the morning sun reflected off the tops of the buildings across the street, catching the faint movement of leaves in a gentle breeze, and the faint hum of distant traffic served as a subtle counterpoint to the intimacy and stillness inside the apartment. Ethan spoke softly, his voice measured and deliberate, describing a small plan for the day, a few errands, and the tasks he hoped to accomplish, his tone calm and even, carrying with it a quiet authority that demanded attention without imposing, and Victoria listened, absorbing each word, her gaze following the rhythm of his hands as he gestured lightly, conveying ideas with subtle motion and precision. She took a careful sip of her coffee, the warmth of the cup grounding her in the ordinary while her mind processed the extraordinary unfolding around her, noting the patience, grace, and unwavering dignity that Ethan brought to every action. The room held a suspended tension, a delicate balance between ordinary routine and the heightened awareness of presence, observation, and unspoken understanding that had developed between them over the short span of the morning. Ethan moved toward the window again, gesturing lightly toward the street outside, pointing out a small detail, a neighbor walking their dog, a delivery truck making its quiet rounds, a cluster of children playing in the distance. And Victoria allowed herself a soft nod, a subtle acknowledgement of the world continuing around them while they maintained their suspended moment of observation, connection, and reflection. Lily glanced up briefly, offering a small smile to Victoria, who returned it gently, the interaction brief, yet meaningful, a reminder of the human threads that tied the unfolding narrative together with simple gestures and quiet attention. Ethan returned to his place by the counter, setting down a small note he had written for Lily's day, and Victoria observed, noting the consistency, thoughtfulness, and care with which he managed both child and household, the small actions revealing a layered character of patience, resilience, and quiet moral strength. The apartment seemed to breathe with them, each movement of hand, gaze, and body part of an unspoken dialogue that layered observation, respect, and subtle emotional resonance into the space, creating a cinematic tableau that was as ordinary as it was extraordinary. Victoria shifted slightly, placing her cup down with measured care, and the soft sound punctuated the stillness, a gentle accent to the cadence of the morning, the rhythm of gestures, glances, and quiet breaths that filled the room with a sense of emerging trust, mutual recognition, and the anticipation of what might come next. The sunlight drifted across the room, catching the textures of worn wood, fabric, and paper, emphasizing the domestic familiarity transformed by the presence of two people fully attentive to each other, their mutual awareness, quiet dignity, and subtle curiosity creating an intimate atmosphere that spoke of connection, grace, and the understated beauty of ordinary moments imbued with significance and anticipation. The morning had unfolded into a delicate tableau of quiet understanding, the sunlight now fully illuminating the small apartment and casting a warm glow across the room where Ethan Hayes and Victoria Langford had spent the early hours in measured, unspoken connection. Lily sat at the table, her coloring book open before her, the gentle scratch of her crayon adding a soft rhythm to the room that complemented the subtle cadence of human presence and observation. Ethan moved with deliberate care, setting down a cup of coffee and straightening a small pile of notes, his actions precise yet unhurried, reflecting the calm dignity that had characterized his life for so long. Victoria observed, her expression thoughtful, noting the way he maintained order, the quiet strength in his posture, and the respect inherent in each gesture toward his daughter and toward her presence in the space. The room seemed to hold its breath, each sound, movement, and glance amplified by the shared attentiveness, creating a cinematic tension that was both ordinary in its domesticity and extraordinary in its emotional depth. Ethan spoke softly, recounting a plan for the day, the errands and small tasks that had to be attended to, and Victoria listened, attentive, noting the subtle layers of responsibility, patience, and care that defined him. A pause hung in the air, rich with meaning, as Victoria finally placed her cup down and offered words that carried weight without force, reflecting appreciation, respect, and a spark of recognition for the quiet heroism in his daily life. "You manage this so effortlessly," she said, her voice gentle yet imbued with sincerity, and Ethan nodded, acknowledging the observation without the need for words to embellish the truth. Lily looked up briefly, her eyes meeting Victoria's, and the small, shared smile that passed between them added a soft, humanizing touch to the charged atmosphere. The sunlight shifted slightly, highlighting the textures of worn wood, soft fabric, and paper, and framing the space in a warm, golden hue that seemed to celebrate the ordinary yet profound interactions that had transpired. Ethan and Victoria shared a moment of silent acknowledgement, the room carrying the weight of unspoken understanding, mutual respect, and the tentative promise of connection. As the morning continued to unfold, there was a sense of quiet completion, a narrative of dignity, grace, and second chances woven through simple gestures, careful observation, and the attentive presence of each individual in the room. In that shared silence, the ordinary became cinematic, each detail layered with subtle emotion and depth, leaving both Ethan and Victoria aware of the significance of the encounter and the delicate power of quiet strength. And as they finally moved toward the day beyond the apartment, the unspoken question lingered, the gentle curiosity of what might unfold next, and the realization that life, like this morning, often rewards patience, kindness, and dignity in ways that leave one both surprised and profoundly moved. If moments like these inspire you, consider joining us and subscribing, as together we explore the quiet power of human goodness and the unexpected ways it can transform ordinary lives.